This is an absolute masterpiece that cannot be bypassed in the history of horror cinema. Even without a single bloody scene, the sheer shock of its ending twist is enough to instantly suffocate the audience. Truly sophisticated horror films don't need cheap gore to send chills down your spine. It is the ultimate textbook of suspense and thriller. The Skeleton Key. At the start of the story, 25-year-old Caroline begins each day by packing up the bodies of elderly people. She has worked as a hospice care assistant for 3 full years. Yet her kindness meant nothing to the hospital, which would unhesitatingly discard the bodies of deceased elders without relatives and dump their cherished personal belongings into the trash. But this time, as Caroline looks at the full box of the old man's personal items, she suddenly realizes how fake this kind of care really is. She understands that continuing this work will only turn her into a numb machine for handling corpses. So, Caroline quit the nursing home job. She wanted to find a place where she could truly help dying people. When a caregiver job offering $1,000 weekly appeared in an ad, the naive woman thought she could grasp the chance to make up for her childhood regret of not caring for her dying father. Little did she know she was stepping onto a terrifying trap, meticulously prepared just for her. As she got closer to her employer Violet's house, strange things began happening more frequently. Soon, Caroline discovered her car was out of gas and pulled into the nearest gas station. Just as she went to pay, she noticed a conspicuous line of red brick dust scattered on the ground by the door. This substance was traditionally used by African Hoodoo as a physical barrier against evil spirits, but the oblivious Caroline didn't dwell on it, just wanting to pay and leave quickly. She called out repeatedly, but no one appeared. Only faint, intermittent sounds of a child crying could be heard. Out of curiosity, she walked towards the sound. Suddenly, startled, she paid and left immediately. Driving the final stretch to Violet's house, the car passed through dense, suffocating oak woods, the moss hanging from branches like ghostly arms, and as the camera looked down, Caroline was slowly swallowed from view, seemingly foreshadowing her fate. Moments later, she finally arrived at Violet's house, greeted by a sinister manor mansion. Though the building itself was grand and imposing, its interior was long decayed and rotten. Caroline called out sharply a few times with no response, so she pushed open the tall, narrow front door herself. The foyer, which should have been bright and airy, felt unnervingly oppressive and gloomy. Moving through the dim hallway, she finally saw Violet and the elderly Ben, who needed care, in the back garden. Just as she was about to greet them, someone suddenly spoke behind her. The speaker was Luke, Violet's personal lawyer, who usually managed the elderly couple's property and wills, occasionally helping hire caregivers. After a brief exchange, Violet actually complained about Caroline's accent, said young people couldn't handle the manor's old rules, and seemed reluctant to hire her. Deeply disappointed, Caroline immediately turned to leave, but Luke chased after her and desperately persuaded her to stay. He knew finding a caregiver for this godforsaken place was incredibly hard, and Ben genuinely needed care, so he sincerely hoped Caroline would show kindness. Luke's words precisely triggered Caroline's guilt over her deceased father, so she agreed to stay. On her very first day living in the manor, she encountered chillingly bizarre events. After unpacking, Caroline went to take a bath but found the mirror above the sink missing, so she prepared to ask Violet about it. She was astonished to discover the huge mansion didn't have a single mirror. Just as she puzzled over this, distant jazz music began playing. Following the sound, Caroline found Ben and was straightening his blanket when he suddenly grabbed her arm. Ben seemed desperate to say something but couldn't make a sound. At that moment, Violet appeared from behind carrying medicine, saying it was her husband's chronic condition and he'd be fine with his medication. Before outlining the care duties, Violet asked an inexplicably strange question.
You're written on, aren't you?
Not where you can see.
Violet then explained Caroline's job: simply care for Ben. No housework needed because only she knew how to clean this old house properly. Later in conversation, Caroline learned Violet and her husband had bought this old house from a wealthy brother and sister back in 1962. As Caroline reached to look at a photo, a picture of the previous owners with their servants slipped from the frame's backing, their names written on it. Confused, she secretly put the photo back. Then Violet produced a skeleton key, explaining it could unlock every room in the manor, but she should try to avoid the top-floor attic as much as possible, because that's where her husband had his paralyzing stroke. Yet the very next day, after forgetting a bag of flower seeds, Violet actively sent Caroline up to the attic. Inside the pitch-dark attic, Caroline quickly found the seeds, but an unexplained banging sound came from ahead, so she followed it, discovering a metal box shaking inexplicably on a cluttered shelf. Moving the box, she saw a hidden door behind it. Could Ben's paralysis secret lie within? But when Caroline inserted the skeleton key, it simply wouldn't unlock. Afraid Violet was waiting impatiently after her long absence, Caroline hurried downstairs with the seeds. Just as she reaches the bottom, she bumps into Violet walking quickly toward her.
What took you?
At night, the sound of a shattering vase suddenly woke the sleeping Caroline. Curious, she went upstairs but kept hearing strange rattling noises coming from Ben's room. Upon opening the door, Caroline discovered Ben had disappeared. Hearing the strange sound now coming from outside, she quickly opened the window. There, on the sloping roof outside the window, she spotted Ben, and the eerie scraping sound was from his body crawling. Then, Ben fell from the roof edge. Seeing this, Caroline immediately rushed downstairs to help Ben back inside, but Ben refused outright. During the struggle, Violet arrived and, ignoring her husband's injury, first demanded to know if Caroline had given Ben his medicine on time. After asking, she told Caroline to quickly fetch the wheelchair. Unexpectedly, upon returning inside and looking down, Caroline found the words, "Help me," written on a bedsheet on the floor. In the urgent situation, she stuffed the sheet into a wardrobe before pushing the wheelchair out. But as she helped Ben up, his eyes held the same look as before, though this time it seemed to scream that this place was dangerous. The next day, Caroline told Luke about the strange incident and showed him the sheet with the desperate plea. However, when she unfolded it, she found the writing had mysteriously vanished. Before she could say more, Violet pushed the door open.
I see the children are getting acquainted.
You know you're the only woman in my life.
Their conversation was quite intriguing. After they left, Caroline realized she could only rely on herself. She decided to start her investigation with the creepy attic, hoping to uncover the reason for Ben's paralysis and his rainy night escape. This time, she actually made a new discovery. She found broken key fragments lodged inside the lock of the previously unopenable door. After removing them, the door opened easily. Inside, the room was filled with strange items related to witchcraft. Skulls, talismans, photos of the servant couple, cloth dolls with eyes and mouths sewn shut, and a bizarre snake-shaped ring. While continuing her search, she discovered a gramophone record labeled "Conjure of Sacred Protection." Just as Violet was about to discover her, Caroline quickly hid behind a shelf. But as she prepared to leave, she accidentally pulled back a dust cloth behind her, revealing all the room's mirrors collected in the attic. Unbeknownst to her, Violet watched everything clearly from outside the door. It was Caroline's day off, and she returned to her house in the city to play the record she found in the attic. The audio seemed to contain an ancient ritual incantation. Accompanied by the low, eerie singing, Caroline gradually grew drowsy. Thankfully, her friend Jill showed up just in time. Jill immediately recognized it as a hoodoo sacrifice chant. Hoodoo is an African folk magic, often using charms for healing, blessing, cursing, or even influencing another's soul. But its charms are powerless if the target doesn't believe. Jill knew all this because she had a relative who practiced hoodoo. Unfortunately, the relative wasn't in the shop that day. Back at the manor, Caroline sneaked to the attic and placed a mirror in Ben's room, wanting to see what would happen. Early the next morning, the moment Violet opened the door and saw the mirror, she was instantly terrified. She immediately found Caroline and began scolding her harshly.
I told you and you heard me. No mirrors.
Facing Violet's anger this time, Caroline showed no fear. She said she'd seen the attic's secrets and threatened to quit immediately unless Violet revealed the truth about the missing mirrors. So, lighting a cigarette, Violet began to tell the century-old secret. 90 years ago, this manor was owned by the wealthy Thorpe family who ran a bank. They purchased 2 servants, Justify and Cecile. They were renowned folk healers, deeply versed in hoodoo. But to Thorpe, they were merely cheap slaves, fit only for the dark attic. One day, the manor held a grand party for the bank's anniversary, attended by all the local elite. As the party neared its end, Thorpe's 2 children couldn't be found. Hours later, they were discovered in the attic. A ritual sacrifice was taking place there. Thorpe, enraged, immediately hanged Papa Justify and Mama Cecile on the big tree outside. The intoxicated guests grew frenzied. At the height of their excitement, they grabbed torches and set Papa Justify and Mama Cecile on fire. Strangely, after this, the thriving bank soon collapsed, and Thorpe inexplicably shot his wife before turning the gun on himself. The orphaned siblings lived in the manor until 1962, when Violet bought it. After moving in, Violet kept seeing the dead Papa Justify and Mama Cecile in the mirrors, so she gathered all the mirrors and stored them in the attic.
Now you'll leave. Like all the rest of them.
Violet's story, presented as a warning, was actually a carefully crafted psychological trap. She knew Caroline's guilt over her father's death gave her a natural protectiveness towards the dying elderly, and combined with youthful defiance, the idea of seeing ghosts in mirrors only fueled Caroline's curiosity. After consideration, Caroline decided to stay and continue caring for Ben. But today, while washing Ben, Caroline noticed his eyes fixed on the cosmetic mirror beside the bathtub. Caroline thought letting him see it once couldn't hurt, but the moment she opened the mirror, Ben suddenly appeared to be in extreme pain and slapped the mirror away. The terrifying scene deeply shook Caroline's disbelief in ghosts or spirits. Not wanting Ben to suffer further, she decided to try something. Driving overnight, she reached her friend's relative's Hoodoo shop and bought a full, expensive exorcism kit. Jill urged Caroline not to get involved, but Caroline, burdened with the unresolved grief of not being there for her dying father, projected her guilt onto Ben and insisted on saving him. Late at night, while Violet slept, Caroline meticulously set up her exorcism equipment, but Ben's eyes showed not gratitude. It seemed more like disbelief, and he even shed tears when Caroline performed the ritual. Suddenly, after a clap of thunder, Ben could actually speak. The noise woke the sleeping Violet. To hide the ritual, Caroline hastily gathered the equipment. She then urgently asked Ben why he tried to escape and who he feared. Ben pointed directly at Violet, who had just entered the room. To cover up, Caroline claimed she was just washing Ben's face, and Violet, surprisingly, believed her once again. The events of the past few days flashed through Caroline's mind like slides, suddenly jolting her awake in the deep night. Before she could even gather her thoughts, she spotted a figure moving in the mirror. Utterly overwhelmed, Caroline packed her things early the next morning, determined to leave the terrifying old house. But before leaving, seeing Ben in his wheelchair with only days to live, she thought of her father dying alone. Clinging to a final shred of hope, she ran to the attic and photographed the Hoodoo-related items, hoping Luke could help. With Luke's assistance, they tracked down the previous caregiver who had looked after Ben. Hearing Caroline's story, the caregiver insisted there were no damn ghosts in the mirrors. She believed Ben's severe illness was definitely caused by Violet using Hoodoo magic, and she warned Caroline. But Caroline didn't take the caregiver's words seriously at all, and insisted on dragging Luke back with her to save Ben. After all, she didn't believe in Hoodoo spells at all. And even if it were real, as long as she didn't believe, it couldn't harm her. On the road, they passed the gas station from before. Caroline remembered the Hoodoo protective red brick dust was also used here. Perhaps they could find useful information, so she led Luke inside to investigate. However, at the doorway marked by the red brick dust line, Luke suddenly stopped and said, "Ladies first." Only after Caroline entered did he follow. This time, they encountered the same blind elderly woman again. The old woman explained that sacrificial magic is a potent Hoodoo ritual granting the caster immortality, but at the cost of draining another living person's life force. Hearing this, Caroline finally understood. Ben's sudden total paralysis must be due to Violet absorbing his life force. Time was critical. Braving heavy rain, she prepared to rush back to the manor immediately. But Luke thought it was absurd. Even if Violet was harming her own husband, they should call the police. Caroline, however, believed she was Ben's only hope, and delaying further put Ben in immediate danger, so she left Luke behind and hurried back to the manor. To test if Violet was truly the evil spirit using Hoodoo, Caroline secretly sprinkled a line of red brick dust outside her own room door and covered it with a rug. She then invited Violet over, falsely claiming there was a leak in her room. No matter what she said, Violet remained firmly outside the red brick dust line, visibly stepping back, then quickly excused herself to finish cooking. That action made Caroline, who had been half-doubting, begin to believe in the reality of the spell, and she became more convinced that Violet had used sorcery to paralyze Ben. She decided she absolutely must get Ben out of the old house. After dumping Ben's daily medicine, Caroline injected sedative into sugar cubes. At dinner, she put her plan into action. Violet seemed to know the sugar was tampered with and refused to eat it. Just as the plan seemed doomed, the power suddenly went out. While Violet went to fetch candles, Caroline quickly stood up and poured the sedative directly into Violet's tea, then sat back down calmly. Only after watching Violet drink the tea did Caroline choose to reveal the truth. But just as Violet collapsed, she pulled out a talisman with her left hand and began drawing on the floor with her right, chanting a spell aloud. But before she could finish, Caroline snatched the charm away. To her surprise, it was the exact same supreme protection spell she had seen in the attic. Immediately, Caroline rushed Ben towards escaping the manor, but the main gate was already firmly locked. Ramming it with the car proved utterly useless, only rendering the vehicle useless. Worse, Violet was waking up. In desperation, Caroline hid Ben in the tool shed near the edge of the yard. However, the moment she stepped outside, Violet pursued her with a gun. In the critical moment, Caroline spotted a small boat by the lake. Miraculously, stumbling and staggering, she actually managed to escape the terrifying manor. The very first thing she did upon rescue was not call the police, but seek Luke's help again. Fortunately, this time, after seeing the evidence Caroline brought back, he finally believed her. At that moment, Violet called, and Luke quickly turned on a recorder, saying it would help collect more evidence. Hearing this, Caroline's anxious heart finally relaxed. But immediately after, she noticed beginner's lawyer manuals and trust fund primers on Luke's desk, along with a serpent-shaped ring identical to the one from the attic in the drawer. A chill instantly ran down Caroline's spine. The next second, she was grabbed by the throat. It turned out Luke was actually working with Violet. Shortly after, he drove Caroline back to the manor. Only then did Caroline realize that Violet's real sacrifice target was not Ben, but herself. Despairing, Caroline spotted the red brick dust outside her room like a final lifeline. She begged Luke to let her see her father's photo one last time before she died. Seizing the chance, Caroline dashed into the room and grabbed the red brick dust, sprinkling it at every doorway inside. True enough, Luke was blocked outside the line, unable to enter. But as Caroline sealed the last door, she bumped into Violet, who suddenly blew a handful of dark ash into Caroline's eyes. They then struggled violently. However, Violet was old. Losing her balance, she fell from the second floor, breaking both legs. Furious Luke, blocked by the red brick dust, had to find another way. Yet, even with broken legs, Violet dragged her heavy body forward, quickly forcing Caroline up into the attic. The attic was already prepared with a ritual circle made of candles and mirrors. Hearing Violet's chilling voice, Caroline, momentarily losing her composure, unexpectedly pulled out that protection charm she had snatched earlier. She then found the sulfur, candles, and lime needed for the ritual in the attic. Returning to the circle, she placed a red candle directly ahead and drew the protection symbol with the lime block. When Violet crawled into the attic, she didn't attack right away. Instead, she sneered and said,
"All that circle protects is you. You stay back! Waiting for you to believe. It doesn't work if you don't believe."
Meanwhile, Luke played the ritual chants downstairs. Violet also positioned herself behind a mirror. Images of souls sacrificed through the ages flashed in the mirror, Thorpe's daughter and the real Violet. With a sudden shriek, the soul in the mirror transformed into Mama Cecile. After the ritual ended, Caroline awoke from unconsciousness, pushed the mirror off herself, and picked up the lighter and cigarettes beside Violet. And now, only then did I understand the ritual was never about stealing life force, but soul transference. 90 years ago, Papa Justify and Mama Cecile transferred their souls into the Thorpe children's bodies right in that attic. The ones truly burned that night were the Thorpe children. Later in 1962, by selling the house, they transferred their souls into the buyers, Violet and Ben. Now, they had completed the transfer once again. The souls of Papa Justify and Mama Cecile, spanning a century, had moved into the young bodies of Caroline and Luke. The real Caroline and Luke had become the frail, elderly Violet and Ben. The film ends with despair in their eyes. On the first watch, you might be stunned by the earth-shattering twist ending. But on a second or even third viewing, you'll discover the director planted brilliant clues throughout. Early on, Violet criticized Caroline's accent, asked about tattoos, and inquired about her family. She was actually gathering information about the new body for the soul transfer. Later, Ben, who was Luke, reacted painfully to the mirror because he couldn't bear seeing his young self trapped in an old body. The tears he shed during Caroline's ritual weren't from gratitude, but sorrow that she now believed in the magic. As for Violet pulling back from the red brick dust, she wasn't afraid. She was deliberately acting for Caroline. This airtight, circular narrative, combined with its deep exploration of belief and human nature, cements its status as a textbook masterpiece of psychological horror. All right, that's all for today. See you next time.